Welcome back, gals, guys, and everyone else. I know it's been a little while since the first part of this video, but editing delays happen, but we've finally got it up. So on screen is a reminder of where we got to at the end of the last video. And also, if you're expecting a vlog today, I'm moving the vlogs from Thursdays to Tuesdays for a reason that will become evident next Tuesday when it goes up. So, should we get into it?
Here we have the sculpt that we've just finished. I keep it under a plastic bag, wrapped in cling film, which means you are taking care to make sure none of the moisture can escape from the clay because it's a water-based clay. Preparing now to do our mold making. Because right here we have our silicone and we have our thixotropic agent. We're going to be doing this as a brush on mold. We also have our other ancillary items, such as cardboard for making some mold walls out of, knife to cut the mold walls, and a hot glue gun for gluing the mold walls together. Also, we have a bunch of our clay from the sculpt, which we're going to use to patch holes in the walls of the mold if we have to. So, should we get this molded?
First, I clear up around the edges so we have cleaner castings and require less trimming per casting we actually take in polyurethane out of the final mold. Then I hit the sculpt with some lacquer. That'll make it just a little bit more resilient during the mold making process, so we're less likely to chip it with our fingers just by touching it. And also possibly fill in any fingerprint marks that I've left in the very soft clay. Then we start to build our advanced silicone catching apparatus all around it out of the advanced technical material known as cardboardium. You can use anything for this really. I often use foam board because it's nice and structurally solid, but then there's a lot of people who will use styrene or plasticard because you can reuse it multiple times, and there's a lot of things that can glue that together. But here, I actually just use hot glue and then fill in any of the gaps with clay.
There we go. We have the walls for our mold. This will keep any of the silicone that we're putting on it from escaping and also create a nice defined edge for the silicone around it, which when we take this off and put the mother mold on it, will give a defined shape for the silicone to then slot into the mother mold. And so these corners basically act as our registration marks.
Here we just give it a quick spray with our release agent, though not massively important for the sculpt since the clay isn't going to stick to the silicone. It's great for the cardboard that can absorb the silicone somewhat, becomes stuck to it. Speaking of silicone, here's where we're going to make the mold proper. This is condensation cure RTV silicone, and it's super simple to use as it cures easily. It's not massively toxic, though I am wearing gloves, and it's just a simple 1 to 10 mix that we do on our scales and mix as thoroughly as you can before pouring our first very liquid layer over the piece. And as you can see, I'm holding the cup up quite high in the air to try and encourage all of the bubbles to leave the mixture that we put in whilst we were mixing it. Once that's on, and a little bit tacky, we get to build over that with our thixotropic layer. Basically, we add silicone thixo to the mixture of the next layer that we're putting on, having mixed it up just like we did before, and we get something a little like this.
So now what we have is stuff that doesn't run. Look at that.
As you can see, there is a big difference between the consistency of thickened silicone and non-thickened silicone. Pretty simple really. One thing you need to make sure is that when you're putting your next layers of silicone on, that the first layer set enough that it can support the weight of the silicone you're putting on after it. Otherwise, it all kind of gets a little bit mixed up as it sloughs off like melting flesh. There's an analogy I didn't expect to make. The reason I'm presenting this like this is because this isn't that hard to do, and I want to kind of remove the barrier to entry for you guys to try this yourself. If you ever have any questions, please drop me a message. But of course, if you want to see more of this stuff done, make sure to subscribe to the channel, follow me on Facebook, and also check out my relatively new Instagram, where I share lots of work in progress behind the scenes photos. And whilst I was talking, the silicone set, and I actually removed the cardboard mother mold, and we just throw that away because we can't really use that again. With the silicone set, we're able to wrap around some plaster bandages to make our mother mold, which holds the silicone rigid, and then pull off the mother mold, pull off the silicone, and see the state of the original sculpt. They usually don't survive this process, but that's okay. We can make as many more as we want now because we have a silicone mold, which we now attack with our polyurethane resin. This is a 2-part rotocast resin. that you mix equal parts A and B together and then roll around in the mold, doing a couple of layers until you have a solid enough piece that you're then able to peel the silicone off and pop it out. And pretending to be Blue Peter, here's one we made earlier with some filters we made earlier. This was my first casting from this mould that I'd taken to one side and attacked with a Dremel to get all the flash off the edges and cut out the holes on the inside of where the filters were going to fit in. And the filters are the exact same filters that I used for my full-size Roadhog mask. After washing it off, we hit it with some primer and then get to painting. First thing we want to do, even though we've just primed it black, we actually want to paint it a kind of off bluish grey black, dark black colour thing, kind of, you know, just like what you see, because a lot of rubberized things like a gas mask for example have a slight blue tinge to them, and one of the ways you make a solid object look like a different material is by picking the correct highlights. Then whilst that's drying, we give our filters a base coat of their own. They want to be base coated in a nice gunmetal metallic paint, so we just go over there and do that. I then put a base coat of white around the rim where it's going to be yellow, using the natural lines of the piece to guide the paintbrush itself, so we're not having to freehand it exactly as a perfect line around the edges. You can kind of line the brush up with the gap. Once the base coat is dry, we can go over and actually put some highlights on it with dry brushing. This is where we pick a lighter colour and apply a little bit to our paintbrush, dry our paintbrush off a little bit by wiping it on a bit of kitchen towel or say your arm if you're terrible like me, and then you brush it over the raised areas of your mask, which really brings out the details that you've sculpted into it. Since there's not too much detail on this mask, it's not a great deal of effort, but it makes such a difference for other texture heavy masks like my old Kindred mask. And then once that's on, I then just paint the laces their base colour and let them dry off. Hopefully, one thing you'll take away from watching this video is that when painting masks like this, order of operations is important, because you've got to paint base coats down, let them dry before you can then go and dry brush other parts and then base coat other bits that would have been disturbed by the dry brushing. For example, we had to put down the base white before painting this yellow one, because the yellow won't go straight over the gunmetal that we painted on it already. But if we paint the yellow on too early, it'll just mix with the white and look really blotchy. But here we are, just putting the yellow on in much the same way that we did the white after it's dried. And then we get to the fun part where we can take our hot glue gun and glue the filters on. And by the time we've done this, the colour we put down for the lace has dried, so we actually can put our wash over them. And why we're using a wash is because it means we just wash over it with this ink and it settles in all of the recesses. And because we put some texture in there by pressing the laces in, it highlights the lace texture, makes it look a little bit more realistic. And then we hot glue our strap onto the mask, and there we go! A finished mask! As this finished project slowly rotates on its lazy Susan for you all to see how it's come together, I want to thank you for coming with me on this journey. We'll have some more videos in the future as I'm now producing more stuff since I've got my own studio space, and you might notice from the background here, this is quite an old video that I finally got around to editing together. Hence the delay between the first half and the second half. But enough about that. How about we hand over to a friend of mine from Overwatch Cosplay who modelled this final mask for me to take some photos of it on a human rather than just on the stand, because I think you don't really appreciate how well it goes on somebody until you see it on, and I could not be happier with this object. So thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you again next time. Bye!